Hello and welcome to our regular conversations with Gökhan Bacık. Gökhan, good to be with you.
My pleasure, Yavuz. Hello.
Gökhan Bacık, Professor Gökhan Bacık is based in Czechia and Panaki University, and we are going through each and every conversation is about old and new Turkey. So this is a new episode of Old and New Turkey as of March 28, Sunday. Let's talk about nationalism, Gökhan. That fine?
Yeah, that's okay.
It's nationalism in Turkey, because a lot of mergers, fusions, we are talking about Islamism, we are talking about nationalism, nativism, populism, etc. But nationalism is important in this current context. How relevant it is it today in Turkey?
Yeah, it's relevant, Yavuz, because usually there is a kind of new standard right now when understanding Turkey in a kind of contrast between old and new Turkey. Whereas nationalism is a field where we observe old and new Turkey are very similar to each other. So old Turkey was nationalist, new Turkey is nationalist. So when we analyze Turkish actors, the parties, one of them might be Islamic, the other nationalist or Kemalist, but they all nationalist parties. So Turkey is a field of different brands of nationalism. First of all, we should understand it, Yavuz, as a main consequences of Turkey's failure to become a modern state. So unlike
you say failure.
Failure means that in the beginning, even in Europe, nation state was based on a kind of national identity, but gradually that was transformed into a modern citizenship, which is a legal construct rather than an ideology. But so, for example, to a large extent, German citizenship is a legal concept rather than very much attached to German ethnicity. Of course, there are overlapping factors. I'm not rejecting that. But in the Turkish case, there is no such legal concept of citizenship in Turkey. Citizenship is still very much ideological. It's about ethnicity. So Turkey's failure is it has never been successful to generate let's say, a neutral, a legal concept of citizenship. Then that is basically because of this failure. What we see as Turkey is composed of different groups trying to impose their understanding of identity. So in this case, for example, we have ultra-nationalist party, Nationalist Action Party, which sometimes even appears us as a kind of a party which entertains even quasi-racist and racist ideas. But
when you look at, because it goes quickly here, the latest, what ideas?
I mean, entertaining some ideas which sounds more than nationalism. I mean, quasi-racist or even racist ideas. Mm-hmm. So when we look at HEP,
we have a little wobbly connection. So if we slow it down, I think it will stabilize itself.
We have another, the second party, HEP, which is formally presenting itself as an Islamic, but also it's nationalist party. So in that case, we have an Islamist brand of nationalism. But this is not, again, only about AKP. All actors, Islamic actors in Turkey have been nationalist parties. So even you can imagine nationalism as the second ego, second identity of Turkish nationalism. So AKP is also nationalist. Then we have the Kemalist Party, which is on paper is a social democrat secular party, but this is the secular brand of nationalism. Mm-hmm. So, and we have the Good Party, which is also a nationalist party by definition. They are proud of nationalism. Even they are close to, it's between Islamist nationalism and MHP brand of nationalism, but again, it's nationalism. So
you are entering into my second question in a way, but please go on, because distinguishing between AKP, CHP, and now somewhat rising Good Party, E Party under Akşener, the similarities and differences, yes.
Yeah, I mean, to a large extent, they are. I mean, the similarity is in degree and how they explain nationalism. But there are some commons, if I may call it. The first is they all believe, no matter Good Party, Kemalist Party, Islamist Party, they are all state-oriented. So if it is about state, for example, if there is a debate about foreign policy, they all together. We have seen this many times before. So we rarely see opposition parties are critical of sending troops to Iraq, for example, or we never see opposition parties are asking more connections with European Union, which might be even in favor of them. This is mainly the first point that all share, state-centered nation, very much state-centered. The second is, even again, they are different, Kemalist, Islamist, or moderate. They all share a similar history thesis, according to which Turkish nation has never done a great mistake. So if you come up with the idea of Armenian problem, some historical mistakes, they never accept that. So this is
it's a flawless history.
Yeah, flawless. So it's a metaphysical aspect of Turkish nationalism. Turkish nation has a historical mission. It's singled out. So of course there are some mistakes, but never such mistakes. So this is the second point. The third point is it's about Islam, including Kemalist party. The Turkish parties, they all believe that Turkish Islam is better than Persian Islam or Arabian Islam. But we don't know what is Turkish Islam. I mean, this is a kind of fuzzy idea which is recurring itself for decades, but it is a kind of political argument which is used against Arab nationalism, Persian nationalism, because we shouldn't also underestimate that Turkey is historically facing some other grand nationalist narratives. Middle East is not only a very religious area, but also a very nationalist area. So you face the Kurdish nationalism, the Persian nationalism, even in Iran, even it's an Islamic state, Islam is not the only power that affects Iranian politics, but there is Persian nationalism. And finally, the fourth shared principle, if I may say, is they all anti-Greek, if I may say that. So surprisingly, for example, on Syria, there might be some differences. When it comes to Turkish foreign policy on, let's say, Palestine, there might be some differences. But there is the Greek problem in Turkish foreign policy since the beginning of Turkish Republic. No matter who rules Turkey, it might be Islamists, it might be seculars, there is a kind of very critical perspective. So in that regard, I may say that the Greek problem is the Palestinian problem of Turkish foreign policy. So
what about Armenia?
Well, of course it is, but Armenian problem is not a typical foreign policy issue. It's a foreign policy issue as well, but this is something about historical discussions, so on and so forth. But in my understanding, in terms of its impact to domestic politics, the Greek issue is much more decisive because it has an Asian problem, it has European aspect, it has Cyprus problem. So if I am asked to comment on, I would say that one major problem in Turkish foreign policy, which has played key role in the last decades, in terms of becoming part of some sort of domestic dynamics, authoritarianism, legitimizing nationalism, since Atatürk period, including İnönü, Cyprus issue during 1960s, which create huge problems between Turkey and US. Then we have Menderes period, some very ugly stuff happened in Turkey against minorities, so on and so forth. So this is another shared point. So no matter they are Islamic nationalists or Kemalist nationalists, there is a consensus among Turkish political parties that they all see the problems with Greece as a kind of ontological, if I may say that. They are very much alerted about that. Of course, they have they share a lot of stuff on other, including the Armenian problem, but comparatively for them, the Greek problem or the problems with Greece are much more critical.
The two more questions, and then we're through. The one is, of course, the current streams of or trends, let's say. And now we see a sort of escalating, growing merger between nationalism and Islamism, political Islam, meeting the sort of pan-Turanist dominated part of the Turkish nationalism, etc. How do we see the future from that point of view? Will Turkish nationalism, as before, as 100 years ago, just before the Republic, will be the dominant supra-identity, including containing also political Islam, or vice versa? or
Well,
on equal terms?
well, as I said, historically speaking, Turkish Islamic groups have always been nationalist. So, so I mean, this is an interesting
big problem
point.
there, although. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, at least hypothetically, Islam is a universal religion. So, but despite Turkish nationalism is a local, let's say, ideology, but compared with Islam as a universal, but we never see an intellectual debate about this incongruence. So we don't have any Islamic actor, leading Islamic actor, of course not intellectuals, who come up with the idea that Islam is universal. So how come we merge it with Turkish nationalism? So this paradox is inherent in Turkish Islamic actors. This is not about only AKP, including the Gülen movement, the orders, but
or Felicity Party, for example.
I mean, the origin of Felicity Party is Milli Görüş, which means national opinion. Their newspaper name is Milli Gazete, the national. So it's not Ummah, it's not Islamic. It's very complicated because if you go to Ottoman period, you see that religious groups are with state against Iranian threat. So it's a result of many different dynamics which overlap in a very complicated way. But having said so, I should also emphasize that there are but differences between AKP brand of nationalism and MHP, Nationalist Action Party brand of nationalism. So in the very, very long term, it depends on the, let's say, it depends on the which dynamics the leaders are going to focus on. Because even there are similarities, the MHP brand of Turkish nationalism is looking Islam from a nationalism first perspective. So AKP brand of nationalism is Islam first perspective. So this hierarchy, I think in the long term, there are some intellectual or political limits to make them perfectly compatible. But I don't know how MHP and Islamic AKP are going to manage them in the long term. Normally, I would say that at a point, it's going to be a problem. At a point, because
in the long run,
but in the very long term, right now, these differences cannot affect Turkish politics because, to a large extent, political blocs not based on mostly according to what they are against. So right now, MHP and AKP, ultra-nationalist party and AKP, are united against threats, including the Kemalists, the Kurdish nationalism, let's say European Union, the foreign powers. So they don't have any time to focus on these differences. Otherwise, even both are nationalists, I should say that there are some differences in terms of how, let's say, they define or they formulate their understanding. So in the very, very long term, I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of problems between AKP and Nationalist Action Party. But for the time being, I think it's premature because there are a lot of common stuff they are, encountering. I mean, problems that makes them continuously postponing that differences.
What does Good Party, E Party under Meral Akşener, is their plate different than the plates of AKP and MHP in terms of merging with a different formula? Why we see that the Good Party, E Party is slightly on the rise, probably passing the 10% to 11%, etc., according to reliable polls. What do the sort of conservative nationalist voter see in them as differently from the other two parties?
I think in terms of ideological identity, this party is information news. I mean, for the time being, it's very difficult to make a conclusion about this party evaluation. It is a party
right of or center right, slightly right of center right,
well,
maybe.
Right now, it is close to center, no doubt. Mm-hmm. Mainly because the party has a very charismatic leader. So mainly because of Meral Akşener, but there is a political intellectual fight within this party. How to define this party's relations with nationalism? There are some people who want this party to be more nationalist, but there are some people like the former governor of central bank,
Durmuş Yılmaz.
They want this party to be more like former Motherland's Party or Truth Path Party, center-right parties.
Of the one that started by Turgut Özal later.
Özal. So this party is yet to clarify its identity, which is not, again, unusual in Turkey. In the Turkish case, it may take parties, even the Kemalist party, if you go to early 30s, it takes some time to learn how this party is taking economy, taking foreign policy. There are fluctuations. So E Party is mostly popular right now because of economic problems, because the ultra-nationalist party is not performing well. So this is a party which is in search of an identity. For the time being, I would label E Party, Good Party, as a party close to center, at least based on its leaders' narrative.
Its pursuit of identity is still in flux.
That's right. There are some, because there are some guys, influential guys in this party, and if we make some calculations based on what they say on Kurdish issue, on foreign policy, you may get the idea that this party might end up as a bit more nationalist. On the other hand, being nationalism, as I told in the beginning, it's mainly because of Turkish public. In Turkey, nationalism is by default a positive. So it's good to be nationalist. I mean, in daily life, people are presented. He's a good guy. He's nationalist. Nationalism in Turkey is packaged, historically packaged as something personal virtue. Okay, it's good to be nationalist. We are nationalists, which means
passepartout. Yes.
That's the point. So in any case, to engage with larger part of Turkish society, that you need that. So that is why, for example, it is very interesting. There is no serious party, by serious I mean influential party in Turkish politics, which can criticize nationalism intellectually. This is quite a bizarre situation, comparatively speaking. I mean, if we understand Turkey is a country once being part of Europe, the ideas of modernization, and if we cannot find even one party which is not able to criticize, including the Kemalist party, Social Democrat party, intellectually nationalism, then it means there are a lot of problems regarding Turkey. That's why it's not surprising to see Good Party also trying to use nationalism to engage large parts of Turkish society.
Even Meral Akşener bragging about not having a passport, etc. So this is what she said. So I don't even have a passport, she said, which I think clings well with the electorate as you describe it. But one final question. We left out one sort of nationalism, which is Kurdish nationalism, which is part of the phenomenon in Turkey. Where is it now? How do we place it into this picture?
Again, formally speaking, the Kurdish party is trying to express itself through a more universal political discourse, such as human rights, left-leaning political narrative, but
HDP.
HDP.
Talking about HDP.
Yes. HDP, the Kurdish party, but there are structural limits because no matter what HDP is doing in this process, HDP is facing and block Turkish nationalist actors. So that's another reason it's a structural dynamic that creates also nationalism among Kurds. That is why, historically speaking, I think after 90s, Kurdish political activism in Turkey is mostly about identity, Kurdish identity. By Kurdish identity, what I mean is, it is no longer possible to persuade Kurdish people by offering them democratic reforms. Of course, democratization is an important aspect of Kurdish problem, but once Kurdish problem is now an identity problem, it's about nationalism, it is no longer possible to solve this problem by democratization. So it's not satisfactory, no longer satisfactory. And plus, there is another fact, dimension, that is the Syria, Rojava. There are some Kurdish groups acting mostly as a quasi-state, also increasing their ability, in terms of some diplomatic, even informal contacts with foreign countries, including the US. So that is another aspect that makes this party structurally, again, nationalist. So even the HDP brand of nationalism is not like MHP. There are serious differences, but the structural dynamics of Turkey, because this is a game where we have a number of nationalist Turkish nationalist party, and the Kurdish issue is always hot topic, that you cannot imagine that is not creating a nationalistic thinking among, just imagine young Kurdish people in Syria or in Diyarbakir trying to understand Turkish politics, observing the problems in Turkish politics in terms of economy, in terms of democracy, so on and so forth, they inevitably be interested in nationalistic ideas. And by nationalism, I don't mean only an ideology, but talking about their culture, pushing their culture forward, focusing on their language, so on and so forth. So even HDP is part of the game as a Kurdish nationalist party in that regard. Then the picture is a bit more a difficult one, because now it's a political game, a battleground, if I may say, completely dominated by nationalist actors. And that is why there is no party which is able to push another ideology, such as the famous question or infamous question, why there is no left in Turkey. It's mainly because of nationalism strangulates that. You cannot expect social democracy exist strongly in such a society
because
where
social democracy is per se globalist movement.
Or another, there is a very strong demand in Turkish society why Islam is not becoming a normative framework. You never expect that, because just like nationalism strangulates social democracy, it strangulates the moral aspect of Islam. It's just the same logic, same story. So this is quite unusual and surprising, because this is happening not during this. We are not in this time of 1940s. We are not living in, for example, post-Cold War period. We are not living in the beginning of Turkish Republic. It's quite late, and observing Turkey, a country after such long years of modernization and reform, still in such a very much nationalistic environment, is really a bit scary. And I should say it in that regard, maybe pathological case.
That would be my final question as well. We have seen during the throughout the history of modern republic, some waves coming, waves of nationalism erupting 1955 with the pogroms against Greeks, then Cyprus 60s, early or mid 60s, and then 70s, the question of Armenian genocide, Asala violence, again peaking or erupting new wave. 80s, the Kurdish question, 90s, again the Kurdish issue, the violence, etc., counter-violence. All of these issues brought forth the Turkish nationalism. But now, looking at the current situation, is Turkish nationalism, as we speak of, has it peaked unprecedentedly compared to the other periods of the Republic?
Well, I think to a large extent, this time the motto behind Turkish nationalism is domestic politics, the domestic consumption of that ideology, and which is historically, if we compare many cases, it is very usual. And basically, the Turkish domestic actors, political actors, are interpreting domestic politics, the failed coup, for instance, economic problems, in link to some kind of conspiracies. So, in my understanding, that is why I said previously we are not living during 1940s, that we should understand why this is happening right now. Most of this time, Turkish nationalism is promoted by domestic political discourse, domestic dynamics. So there is a theoretical approach in international relations that's called securitization theory, which means that political actors have huge ability to securitize issues. If they come up with the idea, for example, that the nation is facing a problem, just like September 11, the Bush narrative, people believe it. So in my understanding, in a more concrete way, in answering you, there is no objective reason to explain Turkish nationalism in that regard, in terms of foreign threat. Of course, Turkey has enormous problems, but most of the problems are created by Turkey on itself. It's not because of their neighbors, or it's Turkey which started regime change in Syria. It's Turkey which created a lot of problems with Greece. Of course, Turkey has objective reasons to be engaged in foreign policy. But if the question that nationalism is because of that foreign dynamics, I don't think so. I disagree. On that regard, it's mostly a domestic production, and we don't have international objective reasons to justify nationalism in Turkey. Turkey is not in a war, Yavuz. Turkey is not attacked by another country, or there is no state we know around Turkey. Of course, there are competition between countries and Turkey in terms of nation trade, so and so forth, but there is no state which, trying to attack on Turkey or targeting Turkey.
True.
So this is a construction.
There were no noted registered atrocities, hostilities, rather, from Iraqi Kurdistan or from Syria, from YPG. Nothing from Armenia, nor anything from Greece, nor anything from Greek Cyprus. That's, I think, quite established. So that should be also said in that regard.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, it's mostly a domestic production.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gökhan Bacık.
My pleasure, Yavuz. Yeah.
Old and New Turkey, perhaps both Old and New Turkey together. We are going to continue these series in the next Old and New Turkey with Professor Gökhan Bacık. For now, thank you and goodbye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.